sustaining an early learning community. My name is Angela Russell, and for me personally, I have 2 children, ages 6 and 9, and as a parent, it just thrills me to see so many of you here during this first week of 2015, the first official week with them back to school, for you to take the time to be here and make this a priority. So thank you. It's going to be an awesome time. I'd like to acknowledge many of you who are here today. First of all, if you are an elected official from the state, a city council, or if you're a mayor, please stand up. We'd like to acknowledge you. Yes. And what about school board members, superintendents, and educators, superintendents, school board members? Yes. And what about all of our community-based organizations? Let's see you. Nonprofits as well, thank you, yes. Getting excited here. What about if you work for the county or the city on this issue related to early learning, an emphasis on families? And those who are truly on the front lines, our caregivers and parents. Some of you probably wear more than one hat. Thank you. And if you happen to be the First Lady of Washington, Trudy Inslee, can you stand up too? Thank you so much for being here. Before we get started, I just want to point out that in your seat, you should have some note cards, and you'll have a chance to actually ask our presenters some questions. So what we'd like to ask is, if during their speeches, during their presentations, if you have a question, write it down and just pass it towards someone at the end of your aisle. Just pass it forward, and we'll have spotters around who will be monitoring that, and we'll pick up your questions for you, and then we'll ask them at the very end. So hopefully, does someone have a note card so I can see what it looks like? I should have, thank you. Yes, that's what it looks like. And again, just pass it. If you are sitting on an aisle, then you are the designated person. You have some responsibilities today. Thank you. Our 2 co-hosts today, King County Executive Dow Constantine and Mayor Ed Murray. As a news person, I have to say, I've always noticed in my career, it's so easy for politicians to talk the talk. But what I've seen with both of these gentlemen is that they actually walk the walk. Now, they realize that we're not where we want to be yet, but they're actually doing something about it, and that's part of it today. So if you would join me in welcoming to the stage first our King County Executive, Dow Constantine.
Thank you, Angela. I love saying that. It makes me feel like a newscaster. Thanks, Angela. Angela's actually stepping away from the camera to work on her writing and other projects, and I know we're all going to miss her smiling face on the television news every day, but we are excited about all the work that she's going to continue to do in our community. Let's thank her for her help with our symposium today. You know, from the responses to Angela's questions, we can see the strong connection between all of us here in this room. We care about children and youth in our community and the productive adults that they will become. And we are working to sustain an environment that supports children and families through all stages of development. We have the good fortune to have the resources in this community to help us create a better future for King County and a strong model for the rest of the country. As a father of a soon-to-be 8-month-old daughter, I watch with amazement the remarkable development that takes place in a baby's brain every day. So many incredible things are happening in these first few months, recognizing faces, identifying and mimicking new sounds, and then compiling them into an apparently entirely new language, which she uses constantly. Learning to, with increasing success, grab at everything around her. This weekend's trick was the rattle in one hand, the bell in the other, shake them at the same time, clang them together, and then laugh maniacally and then repeat over and over. Our responsibility is to support and nurture every child and to make sure each has the opportunity to reach his or her full potential. So, let's start this morning by recognizing the organizations that helped put this event together. Starting with the Bezos Family Foundation, which made it possible for us to be here in this beautiful venue today and provided countless hours of staff support from David Phelps and others. Thank you so much. And thanks to our co-conveners for today, the City of Seattle and our Mayor, Ed Murray, to the Sound Cities Association, represented today by our friend, the Mayor of Snoqualmie, Matt Larson, and King County's second largest city, the City of Bellevue, represented by Mayor Claudia Balducci. Now, across King County, a number of cutting-edge, proven strategies are helping people get past the barriers in their lives, helping people get past crises and get on the track to success. This includes efforts like the Roadmap Project in South King County, Eastside Pathways, the King County Early Learning Coalition, and various home visiting and maternity support programs supported by United Way and Thrive by Five, by our cities, by the county, and by private funders. We are joined today, as you saw, by so many elected leaders. County council members, city council members and mayors, school board members, their superintendents, and others. We will work to develop collective commitments to a healthy county-wide learning environment. I'm looking forward to hearing from Dr. Kuhl, from our friends from Washington, D.C., and from local panelists. So many partners, so much good work being done here. But we can be better connected, and we can always do more. If we are to change outcomes, we need to start early. And that's why I've made a commitment to invest early in our kids and our families and our communities to ensure that every baby born in King County has a strong start in life, that every child being raised here is supported throughout the school years, and that every teen enters adulthood ready to succeed. I'll have more to say about that later today, but now it's my pleasure to introduce to you the leader of our county's largest city, my mayor, Seattle Mayor Ed Murray.
Well, thank you, Dal, and it is a pleasure to be here today. You know, I was looking at the news over recent weeks as the year came to an end, and you would think that 2014 had been kind of a tough year. But I think in Seattle, 2014 was an exciting year. Because in Seattle, we passed pre-K. We stood up and decided that we would join other cities around the country and become leaders in doing something about our educational system and about our very youngest students. So to all of you in this room, and there are too many groups and too many folks individually to name, I want to thank you for making 2014 a year about the future of Seattle. So thank you very, very much. So we have our work cut out for us. We have to deliver on those promises. We have to deliver on those promises because just to do it in Seattle is not a victory by itself. We've got to get it right in Seattle, so we'll be doing it in cities and counties and across this state. So the challenge ahead of us is pretty significant. Over the next 2 years, we will start ramping up with $14 million, and over the next 4 years, that will grow to $58 million. And that will be just the beginning of our effort to grow this to make it universal pre-K for the city of Seattle. So the challenges are great. So why am I so excited, and I think why are so many of you so excited? Let me speak as an elected official. There are people in this room who are experts, scientific experts, people in the classroom, folks who can tell you the science and on-the-ground experience. But for me, As a legislator over the last 18 years, I've had a deep frustration with the results that I've seen in the school district that I represented in Olympia, in the city that I represented in Olympia, where 54% of African American children live in poverty, a number that has grown by almost 8% over the last decade. Where the graduation rates for immigrants and children of color and children living in poverty have barely budged. There have been improvements here and there have been improvements there, but generally, they've barely budged. And the expulsion rate of African American students, and particularly African American students in special education, has only risen. So I believe that what we did here in Seattle will begin to change that the curve will begin to change towards actually seeing graduation rates improve. We only have to look at other cities like Chicago to see that's a reality. I believe it will affect the poverty rate in this city, and it eventually will close the opportunity gap that exists in our higher education system. That sounds like a tall order, but we know by looking at other jurisdictions, it can help be one of the key answers to turning those numbers around. You know, I was down for the last few days with whatever's going around, and so I spent some time reading. And first of all, I want to thank Jackie and Mike for sending me lunch yesterday. I appreciated that. But I spent some time reading. One was reading about Mario Cuomo and being reminded about one of the reasons that I am in politics and that I'm in government, because I believe that government can be part of the answer in creating solutions to the challenges that we face. And that's what we are doing here. It is government partnering with community-based organizations to come up with an answer to the issue that faces us and challenges our future. And I also spent some time reading about, I know this sounds weird coming from the gay mayor of Seattle, but reading about Pope Francis and a basic commitment to poverty and to those who live on the margins. And it really resonated with me because it is who I am. Mario Cuomo, Pope Francis, that commitment to poverty, coming from a working class family in West Seattle. You know the story, you've heard it before, Irish Catholic, lots of kids, lots of problems. But out of those basic values from those two individuals is something that we are trying to do here in Seattle with pre-K. We are trying to partner with the community, with those who are actually going to benefit from this. We're going to develop programs with those who are going to benefit from this. And we are going to reach out to those on the margin to make sure that they benefit from this. But we're going to do it in a way that is based on science. The levy supports helping teachers. It helps with tuition assistance for ongoing professional development. That's part of how we make that commitment to the poor and those who are struggling in our schools work. We'll have capital dollars available to make sure we actually have the physical classrooms. We'll be sure that the student-teacher ratio is 10-to-1, that the maximum class size is 20, that the days are 6 hours, it's 5 days a week, and it's 180 days a year. That it's bilingual and support for bilingual students, that it's culturally relevant in the classroom, that the curriculum is high quality, that the lead teachers must have a BA in early childhood education and assistant and associate degrees. It'll assist with coaching to make sure those teachers succeed and those kids succeed. And I think particularly for Seattle and this school district, there is zero expulsion and suspension for the children who are involved. So they wrote me pages and pages, but I'm just going to skip to the end because there are more important people to hear from. So we look forward in the city of Seattle in developing this program, and we look forward with partnering with King County Executive Dow Constantine and the county executive to expanding this throughout the county. We look forward to the other mayors who are here today and the other city council members in partnering with you to expand this program. And if you're struggling with why you should do this or how you convince the people who live in your jurisdictions why you should do this, we have become a very diverse county, and regrettably some of the statistics I said that exist in Seattle now exist countywide. This is one of the ways that you can motivate people to change those statistics so that we are sure we have the outcomes throughout the county. I want to join Dow Constantine in thanking Jackie and Mike Bezos and the Bezos Foundation for your leadership, not just in this city, but in this country. Thank you. I want to thank Frank Blethyn and the Seattle Times for making this a cause and for giving it the coverage it deserves. And I also need to thank The Stranger and the writers on their paper for doing the very same thing. What a fantasy for a politician to get the Seattle Times and The Stranger to endorse the same initiative. I want to thank the Casey Foundation for their leadership. I want to thank the Council President Tim Burgess for his pioneering leadership on this issue. And finally, once again, I want to thank all of you. I think 2014 was an exciting year, and I think because of what you did, what we all did together, in September of 2015, we are going to launch something that is going to be historic, exciting, and change the lives of children in this city. Thank you very much.
Mayor Murray, Dow Constantine, thank you so much for those remarks. Our first I have to remind you, before this started, you may have heard me mention Twitter. I know hopefully you have your phone ringers turned down, but we do invite you to tweet about this. And I have a feeling with our next speaker, there will be plenty of tweetable moments. You likely already know some of her work, Dr. Patricia Kuhl. She is the Bezos Family Foundation Endowed Chair for Early Childhood Learning, co-director of the UW Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences, director of the NSF-funded Science of Learning Center, and professor of speech and hearing sciences. I know it's exhausting, right? She's busy. She is internationally recognized for her research on early language and brain development and studies that show how young children learn. Dr. Kuhl was one of 6 scientists invited to the White House in 1997 to make a presentation at President and Mrs. Clinton's conference on early learning and the brain. And in 2001, she was invited to make a presentation at President and Mrs. Bush's White House Summit on early cognitive development, ready to read, ready to learn. In 2000, she co-authored The Scientist in the Crib, Minds, Brains, and How Children Learn. And now she is here to speak to us about brain science and early learning. Let's welcome to the stage Dr. Patricia Kuhl.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Angela. I can't help but think, what a county, what a city, what a state. I'm so proud to be a part of this unified group, all in favor of helping all of our children. Let's give ourselves a hand. So as Dow Constantine and Ed Murray said, we have a gratitude to all of the public and private supporters here, and particularly the Bezos Family Foundation, Jackie and Mike Bezos, and that fabulous work they're doing on the program Vroom, which you will hear more about. So my role here today is talk about the science that makes the case for early learning. And I have to tell you, it's getting easier and easier to do that because the science is so strongly supporting what it is and why we should start so early. So today, I'm hoping to explain to you that babies come ready to learn in an incredible way, but that the brain has to be built. It doesn't come together as a completely ready-to-go system. It's ready to learn. It needs the input. It needs us. So a brain has to be built. And today's presentation, I'll be sharing with you the newest data from our brain studies. We're first in the world to use this device. I'll show it to you later. Magnetoencephalography, perfectly safe, perfectly non-invasive, to study the baby brain as the brain is active and doing something interesting. We can now show movies. And I'll give you 2 incredible examples today of how the brain studies tell us some things we expect to see, and then other things that surprise us in an astounding way, and help explain why it is the engagement, the active participation of the baby brain when we interact with the children. So in addition to these functional brain studies, we're doing a lot of work studying the structure of the baby brain, looking at the areas that are all there right from the beginning, and the connections, the superhighways that have to get built between the areas so that areas can talk to one another. Reading and all of the incredible things that children do in that first beginning, in that first 5 years, is coming from these brain structures and the connectivity, those superhighways that run between them. So why are we doing this? Because children and their families need help. Not everybody, no matter how educated, knows that children need the kind of input that they need, and particularly in the early period. Everyone is surprised at the degree of learning that's taking place in that baby brain between 0 and 12 months. Who would expect it? And so the science is revealing that while the children are playing and laughing, as Dow said, creating new events at 8 months to surprise us and themselves, what's going on inside to support that incredible development that we can see on the surface? So the first message today is that it's all about timing. Timing is the reason that 0 to 5 really matters. Look at brain growth. If you look at this figure and the percent of the size of the brain that's developed at a particular age, when do you think we ought to be intervening? When do you think we should be paying attention to what the kids are doing? By 1 year of age, the brain is 70% of its total size. By 5 years, when we send them to school, 92%. So 0 to 5, this is the focus. This is when all of the preparation for school and for life is taking place. Major systems in the brain responsible for language and literacy, for social emotional development, for cognitive problem solving. All of the groundwork is being laid in that first 5 years. So we see the overall grain of the growth. What's happening in there to make it grow so rapidly? Well, primarily, we see these connective tissue, these synapses that allow communication over the long superhighways that the information in the brain has to travel. At birth, you can see that those little nodes are the neurons. They're in place at birth. They're in place at birth. 86 million neurons are in place at birth. But all of those neurons will need connections, and they will all develop many connections to neighboring neurons. By the time the child is 3, 86 trillion synapses have been developed, 700 per second in the early period. So the brain is very busy. And by the age of 3, you can see in the middle panel, lots of connections. In fact, so many, babies have 3 times the number of connections that you and I have. And that set of connections allows them to do anything and everything, and they will be trimmed and pruned depending on experience, such that by puberty, 14 to 20, that pubescent period, that brain becomes the more stylized, the neural networks are formed, and trimming of excess synapses has occurred. So this is a big overhaul, that first 3 years, exuberant growth of synapses. And then the systematic pruning, just like you prune a rose bush to strengthen remaining connections. The brain strengthens itself to specialize as it prunes unneeded connections. So that window from early development to first 0 to 5, and then puberty are very, very important times for brain development. So think about this wiring that's going on. And then look at the next slide. This is what behavioral science has shown us is the critical period for language, second language learning. And if you look at your age, find your age on the bottom, and then look at your skill set on the vertical axis, you'll get the story quite quickly. The babies and young children are geniuses. 0 to 7, they're virtually, they will absorb a second language effortlessly. And then after 7, every 2 years, there's a systematic decline in the degree to which you will master a second language. But still, it's possible. You do it, better before puberty than after. But you don't, after puberty, you don't use the same brain machinery. You don't do it in the same way. You don't master it to the same degree. So timing, again, is critical. So when do we want to support language and literacy? When do we want to develop that neural architecture that sets the children up for school and for life? The first 5 years. So what can we learn about how this begins? So in the laboratory at the Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences, we've been looking at early language learning, the first periods during which kids learn. And the first stage of language learning is to learn something about the sounds, which happens between 6 and 12 months, before first words occur. We've learned that at 6 months, babies can discriminate all the, all the consonants and vowels that are used in any language of the world. But between 6 and 12 months, the babies will specialize in the sounds that occur in the language that they're listening to, or languages, if they're bilingual. And by 12 months, they will be specialized for that particular language. So how do they change from citizens of the world at 6 months, hearing all the differences in all languages, which you and I cannot do, to the more dedicated language listeners they become by 12 months? They learn in a very special way, in ways that are fairly unique to infancy. So one of the ways they learn is computational, and we can refer to that as a kind of statistical learning, and I'll explain in a minute what I mean by that. And the second is a social way of learning, and it turns out both of these two are important, but I will show you that statistical learning doesn't take place in the absence of a social context. So the social context turns out to be absolutely critical to the young child. So I'll have you listen to explain statistical learning, I'll have you listen to two mothers, one American speaking English, one Japanese speaking Japanese, to a young child. And you'll hear the kind of melodic sounds of what we call motherese or parentese, and then I'll explain what the baby's brain is doing as they listen. So here we go. First English, then Japanese.
I love your big blue eyes. So pretty and nice. うわ、大きな茶色いお目目。そして綺麗な黒い髪。
Okay, I have to tell you that's, milk to the baby brain. Babies will turn on motherese as opposed to, this parentese motherese, as opposed to adult-directed speech when you give them the choice. Hands down, no matter what the language. They love listening to this melodic speech. What their little brains are doing is shown at the bottom of this slide. They're taking stock on the frequency of the sounds that they hear as they listen to us talk. So in American English, there is a high distribution, high frequency for American English R and L, and words like read and lead, road and load. But in Japanese, you don't see high frequency for R's and L's that belong to English, but instead an intermediate sound, the Japanese R, which doesn't occur in English. Turns out the baby's brain is sensitive to these statistics. As they listen to us talk in the laboratory, you can change them to hear more like a Japanese baby or more like an English baby with 2 or 3 minutes of exposure to statistics that differ. So, it's a little scary that babies' brains are taking this kind of information into account. And not only for auditory events, but visual events, haptic events, music. The frequency matters. What we put in front of children in the early period matters because their brains are being impressed with that information. The brain focuses on high-frequency events. And you can go to France or Japan, and the frequency of sounds in that language no longer alter your brains because your architecture was set very early in life for the languages that you mastered. So that's one of the reasons, the roadblock for second language acquisition later in life is the fact that the sounds sort of don't get through the filters that you've set up. So, computational brain, very powerful. Babies are born with this computational capacity, and it's amazing. And this isn't the only example. There are many examples. But there's something that trumps the statistics. Babies take statistics, but they need a social context. It turns out that the social brain is the primary channel, not only for social and emotional learning, we would expect that, but for cognitive learning in infancy, like learning a language, which we think of as a computational skill. It requires a social context. So how do we know that? Again, the experiments lead the way by showing us that it's the social brain that enables this computational wizardry during language learning. We did an experiment, now it's almost 10 years ago, showing that if you brought Seattle babies into the laboratory at 9 months, at the time when they're beginning to lose the ability to discriminate contrast sounds that come from a foreign language, And you sit them on the floor with their parents behind them and have them listen to native speakers of Mandarin Chinese or of Spanish or another foreign language. The babies learn so well in 12 sessions between 9 months and 10.5 months that they are equivalent in their performance on the sounds of Mandarin to the kids growing up in Taipei who've been listening for 11 months, or the kids in Spain or Mexico who've been listening to Spanish. The baby brain is ready for language in the early period, and the brain will take whatever language and learn the statistics of that language. However, when you run the condition shown on the right, so we had live speakers talking to the babies for 12 sessions in the live experiments, but we ran another group of babies who had not had a live experience but had the DVD, the exact same exposure to the same words, same context, same dosage, same room, everything the same, but it's coming from a disembodied source, coming from a television set. And what happens then? There's absolutely no learning whatsoever. Even though the babies are staring at the video, looking like they're interested in it, there's absolutely nothing going on in the brain to support learnings, because after the 12 sessions of the TV condition or audio alone, when they're watching a teddy bear on the screen, the brain measures and the behavioral measures show there's absolutely no learning. They look just like the control group that's been exposed to English by the American graduate students. So the social brain is doing something very, very important to create a learning situation that doesn't exist when you're just interacting as a baby with a flat screen. There is no social presence and no social learning. So this is very important for parents to know. Parents need to know that it's what we're doing when we engage with the babies that supports their learning. So lately, if you've been reading the press, there's a lot of talk about what is it that supports language growth during this critical early period. And our studies, and I'll contrast them, there's been a lot of talk of the graphs on the left, shown a long time ago to be the quantity differences in the amount of language that children hear at home if they come from professional families. You can see that top blue curve. Kids who come from professional families hear a lot more words than kids who come from a working class family or kids who come from welfare families. So an emphasis is developed about the quantity of words. The worrisome thing is that our measures are showing that quantity alone, just telling parents, talk more, talk more, talk more, you know, a Fitbit for words, you have to get so many words in every day, is not the answer, is not the answer. What we see on the right are studies where we're recording the babies at home. They're wearing a teeny little microphone, and we get their auditory world from first-person perspective. Everything they hear, whether the television's on, whether the radio's on, lots of people are talking to them, few people are talking to them, and what style of speech is being used. And when we analyze that by counting the words and transcribing and then correlating that talk that a child hears at home at 11 months and 14 months with their future language at the age of 2, what we see is that the prevalence of this parentese signal that slows down the speech, emphasizes the sounds, and use a simpler grammar and simpler here and now words, that parentese speech supports language incredibly. And as you see on the graph here, we're plotting the prevalence of the adults in the home speaking parentese to the baby and the words that child produces at 24 months. You can see that curve going straight up. The more parentese occurring in the home, the more words at 24 months. And it's a whopping effect, particularly when parentese occurs in one-on-one interaction. Again, the social piece. When parents engage with their children as they talk with them, then you see the effect that at 2 years of age, children who have had a lot of parentese in one-on-one interaction, 433 words understood. And the children who have had less frequent, infrequent parentese and not as much face-to-face conversations and engagement, 169 words. So the effects are whopping. So this says that it's more the quality of the interaction, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to the brain studies. The other thing I wanted to mention, and both Ed Murray and Dow Constantine talked about it, and that is the importance of bilingual learning. Bilingual learning is going to increase in all of our communities, and I'm here to tell you it's really good for the brain. What we've been doing is studying children in San Antonio. We now have a Seattle study completed as well. In San Antonio, we were following 55 families of children who were born into families in which they're hearing Spanish and English equal amounts of time. So we were very curious about the babies' brains, and we had little caps, not our big MEG machine, but little caps with sensors in it that could look at the waveforms of babies as they were learning both Spanish and English. And the studies convinced us that children are doing the magic on 2 languages just as they can with 1. And they're learning perfectly well and right on schedule, both with regard to their sound knowledge and the knowledge of words, and now they're moving towards reading, and they're doing extremely well. We also understood that these young parents, these were young mothers enrolled in Head Start, how little they knew about the brain, and how eager they were to get the messages about the fact that it was the power they had to talk to children and read to their children to bring them along. Not fancy games, not expensive toys, but really the human engagement that they were providing, the social context and the language input to their children. So we could see that their language skills were excellent, but what was very, very interesting is their cognitive skills. Bilingual babies are cognitively more flexible. And what that means is when you give them a new problem to solve, their brains are more creative in devising a solution to it. It's as though the bilingual experience, they've been switching between 2 languages, and they're able to switch to new problem solving faster than monolingual babies. So here's the task. This is an 11-month-old baby. We devised very intriguing tasks to test babies' cognitive flexibility. The baby's going to be seeing a plexiglass box. You can see it in front of this little girl. She's a monolingual child. And what she's going to do is be able to reach the toy that's in there. We put it in there, and we open one side of the plexiglass box. So she gets used to going in one direction to get the toy. So here she goes. Well, she's supposed to go. Let me try this. There we go. All right. Okay, the toy goes in on the open door, and she's going to push the box a little bit and think about how to get it out. Okay, and then she goes around to the door, and she pulls it out. This is a big thrill to an 11-monther. Okay, now we're going to reverse the rules, turn the box around, and she has to figure out to go the other way. Go to the other side. Okay, here we go again. All right, so now the door is open on the other side. The toy gets placed in the little box. She tries the old way. Okay, all kids do this. They try just like we do. You try the old way. It worked before. And she can't figure out what. How come? Okay, so the time ends and she doesn't solve the problem. Now here's the same task and a bilingual child. Here we go, toy gets hidden. Same kind of pushing. And then, yeah, gotta have that toy. All right, so now we turn it around. Yeah, gotta give it back. All right, now, what happens? Okay, so there's a little bit of pushing, but immediate going to the other side. So the statistical result is that the bilingual babies are statistically much higher at solving this problem, and problems like this. So they have cognitive flexibility. They can understand that the world can work by different rules, just like English and Spanish has different rules. Babies can create these solutions better when they're bilingual. So what's the dream for the future? That we really will understand the mystery and magic of the child's brain, and I want to give you 2 examples. So these 2 examples rely on our big, expensive equipment, $2.5 million magnetoencephalography machine, MEG for short. It's completely silent, harmless, safe. You sit under this thing that looks like a hairdryer from Mars, and it looks at your brain and the firing of the neurons wherever those neurons are firing all over your brain, and we get to see movies. So here's a 6-monther in that machine. We're the first in the world to test babies in an MEG machine, and you can see she can move. We're tracking her head with a kind of GPS, 4 pellets on her little cap, and we know exactly where her brain is at all times. And so she can move. We're going to be able to do experiments, limitless experiments that engage children in problem solving, in language, in listening to music, in getting a sense of their ability to imitate and to replicate what it is they see us do. But what do we see in the baby brain? So we are, in this set of experiments that I'll show you first, we're exposing the babies to the sounds of many languages. And I want to show you what that brain looks like as we play an English sound. So here's the brain of one 12-monther monolingual child. You can see all of the areas. We can now, there's color coding 150, but we can see 1,000 areas in the brain. The interest that in this experiment, the 2 auditory areas you see, and 2 areas Broca's, responsible for talking but not listening, and the little superhighway that runs between them. Now, we turn on the sound, English syllable, the baby hears, and that set of bubbles is the electrical activity firing, obviously in the auditory area where we expected it. The surprise came in the activity in the neurons in Broca's area, the area that kids use to talk. So, what the experiment means, we believe, is that even in our 7-monther and 11-monther participants, as they hear speech, their brains engage to talk back. They're, in a sense, rehearsing. What are the motor movements I'd have to do to join this social conversation? I want to talk back. And you see that as early as 7 months, regardless of the language. They don't know yet. They're not committed to English or Spanish or French or Tagalog. Their brains are actively trying to do that as they listen to us talk. By 11 months, it's become easy for Broca's area to mimic what it would take to say something in English like ba or pa. But if you give a foreign syllable to an 11-monther, the Broca's area works even harder. What would I do to produce that French vowel or that Russian consonant? And that's the same pattern we see in adults. When you listen to a foreign language, your Broca's area is going crazy, trying to understand what would I have to do to pronounce that sound. The important thing for parents to understand is who would have known that talking to a baby engages those social centers, makes them want to practice, makes the brain do its job to get ready to join the social conversation. I think it's absolutely remarkable. Now, the second example I don't have pictures for yet because it's a brand new finding, unpublished. A doctoral student in my laboratory, Christina Zhao, has just exposed babies to music. Just like we exposed babies to language at 9 months, she exposed babies to a common rhythm in a social group with other kids. And they pound on a drum to match this rhythm, and they are exposed for 12 sessions. And a control group comes in for a social play experience but doesn't get the musical rhythm. After the 12 sessions, we measure the brain and look at what's going on as they hear a rhythm. What happens is we see that the auditory areas are much more keenly, sharply responding to that rhythm. They lock on to it when compared to the control group. But the second finding is a complete surprise. It's the frontal cortex. It's areas that you use to attend. It's areas that, what we call executive function, the control of attention. The babies who heard the music in the social settings, their frontal cortices are very, very active. They're attending. Hear that, baby? She's attending. They're attending to that signal. That's a familiar social signal. They like it. They're going to lock onto it. I think it's the beginning of executive function. It's in the early period, babies learning that certain things, oh, this is what this culture does. This culture plays music. This culture speaks this particular language. This culture acts in a particular way. The brain is always working. The babies are always coding. Everything we do matters in front of them. So experiments that are underway right now, obviously if you've been listening, you think that we're very locked onto the idea that the social brain is controlling a lot of early learning. The social emotional context is how the brain gets its work done. It does fancy computation, but it does that computation in the presence of another human being. We think face-to-face interaction is very, very special. So we're arranging experiments in which mothers and their babies are both being monitored as they interact with one another, as they react to smiles and nods and frowns and speech. And we've got the mother in an ERP cap with sensors and the baby in the Meg machine. And we lock these two signals together, we co-register them, and we watch how one brain affects another. How does the smile affect the baby's social centers in the brain? And what we can see already in preliminary stuff is that their brain rhythms tend to coordinate when an interaction is socially fun and exciting for both parties. So brain science is going to help us lead the way. We need all of the people in this room to take the science-based information and make it happen. And I think one of the things that we can feel proud of in our county, city, and state is the notion that we might be able to lead the nation because we bring together philanthropy, the business community, the legislator and policymaker group, and the scientists, and say, if we each play a role, we'll get this done. And so I think 2015 is going to be an extremely exciting year, so let's go. Thank you so much for listening.
Oh, is that fascinating or what? Wow. A reminder, if you do tweet anything, the hashtag is KC Early Learning, KC Early Learning. And then remember, Dr. Patricia Kuhl, along with our other presenters, will be answering your questions in just a bit. So if you have a question for her, you can start writing that now and again, pass it to the end of your aisle. I see one of our spotters in the aisle right now. So after that, if you had a little bit of spark about this issue, hopefully you're on fire right now. You see the importance of good early learning. I was always a believer in a second language, and now I'm like, yes, I did the right thing. So that was good to know. But now I want to talk about what is being done on a national level to address this issue. Our next presenter is Roberto Rodriguez, and he serves in the White House Domestic Policy Council as Special Assistant to the President for Education. Previously, Rodriguez was Chief Education Counsel to U.S. Senator Edward Kennedy, Chairman of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee, HELP. In this capacity, he managed the Democratic education agenda for the committee and led policy development and strategy for legislation addressing early childhood education, elementary and secondary education, higher education, and adult education. Let's welcome Roberto Rodriguez.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Angela, for the kind introduction. I am thrilled to be here and to really send my greetings and congratulations for all that Seattle and Greater King County is embarking upon for our youngest learners. So I bring my greetings from the other Washington on the other coast and from our president in the White House. This is a topic that we are deeply interested in and are working to advance across the federal stage. We draw our inspiration from the wonderful work that is being forged in communities like Seattle and in counties like King County moving forward. I want to acknowledge and thank our co-hosts today, Mayor Murray, and King County Executive Constantine, whom we've heard from, as well as our President of the City Council, Tim Burgess. The alliance here in Seattle and across the county to really recognize the importance of early learning to the individual lives of our children, to their families, and to the future of this community is really, truly inspiring. I also want to acknowledge and thank Jackie and Mike Bezos for their leadership here in the work that they've done, as well as nationally in their work to really bring to light the importance of early learning. We're all here because we recognize what a tremendous difference these early years make in a child's life, in their future success in school, in their future opportunity. And we're reminded of that by the science. We thank Dr. Kuhl for that wonderful presentation that shows how important executive function is in these early years, how important that relationship that children develop with the adults around them and with their parents, how critical that is to their learning and their growth and their development, their cognitive functioning, their social and emotional resilience, which we know that executive function and that social and emotional competency makes such a difference to their later learning once they enter school and to their success. We also know how important closing this opportunity gap is early. In education, we wrestle with achievement gaps that manifest themselves in 4th grade, in 8th grade. We struggle with a dropout rate across the country that unfortunately is still at a crisis proportion. We are losing 1 million young people a year from our high schools who don't stay on track to high school graduation and future college and career readiness. And we are reminded today that the work to begin to bridge that opportunity and those achievement gaps begins in these earliest years. We have a school readiness gap at kindergarten entry that's as wide as 60 points between our low-income children and their more affluent peers. And we know, the good news is, we know with scale, high-quality early childhood education and high-quality early learning opportunities can really reverse that trend. We know that when we do more to provide high-quality early learning, we know that our children later in school are less likely to need special education. They're more likely to complete school. They're more likely to be successful moving forward in life, to finish school, less likely to go to prison, more likely to forge and develop a stable family and a stable job. So all of the evidence, we believe, points to the need to do more in these earliest years for our youngest learners. And we know that the good news is we have the strong economic imperative behind this, high quality early childhood education, and high quality early learning returns anywhere from $8 to $18 on every dollar invested. That's a real investment, a real return. But we also know that we as a country have a moral imperative, and that this work is about making sure that we are providing for our most vulnerable families who don't have the benefits that others do to be able to access the early learning opportunities that we know are critical to their success later in life. So that economic imperative, that moral imperative has certainly been an engine that has driven our administration's focus on the importance of early learning within the President's domestic policy priorities. The President has put forth for us a vision to build a stronger middle class where we provide greater opportunities for healthy families, for families that can be economically stable, that can move forward and provide for their children. And we know that the first rung on a ladder of opportunity toward that middle class is education. The first rung is doing more to make sure we are providing high quality education that helps every child meet his or her full potential. And that education doesn't begin at the schoolhouse doors at age 5 or 6. That education, that development has to begin at birth. If we look at the science, we look at all we know about the research, we cannot afford not to invest in these earliest years. And this is why our administration has put forth a comprehensive, full continuum of policies that the President put forth 2 years ago, and we have worked and endeavored to advance to really do more, beginning at birth, to provide access to high-quality early learning opportunities. For us, that begins with these first 2 years. We've seen how powerful the brain research is, particularly in this 2 to 3 years, first 2 to 3 years of a child's life. We have invested more, $1.5 billion in supporting home visits, voluntary home visits that now are supporting states across all 50 states and reaching over 500,000 families to make sure that our new parents have the opportunity to be visited by a social worker, a psychologist, another trained educator to support their work in nurturing and developing a caring and supportive relationship with their children. That extends into doing more to support high-quality childcare and high-quality early learning opportunities in these first few years of life for our infants and toddlers. And we have undertaken a new investment through the Early Head Start Child Care Partnerships that seeks to forge a higher standard of quality, because we know that the quality of the environments in which our youngest children are spending time really matters greatly for their development and for their learning. We have to maximize every minute that our children are spending with adults around them to nurture them, to help them grow. And so part of the Early Head Start Child Care Partnership is to do more to raise the standards of child care and to do more to expand our Early Head Start programs to reach a greater share of our infants and toddlers and their parents in need. And that continuum of early childhood education culminates with the President's proposal to bring high-quality preschool to every family and every 4-year-old across the country. And this proposal would create a new federal-state partnership where we would help build on the momentum underway already across 40 states who have state-funded pre-K programs, and create the funding mechanisms as well as the standards that speak to quality of environment, as well as to making sure that we are doing more to support child outcomes leading up to that kindergarten year. And to do that through a mixed delivery system, because we know we need to reach our families and our children where they are, in their local community-based providers, in their schools, in their Head Start settings and elsewhere, to make sure that they have every chance that they need to be able to attend the preschool opportunities that will help them be successful in those later grades. We're really excited about all of this work, and I think that the time has come for early learning. As a country, we now have 70% of the public recognizing that we need greater investments in high-quality early learning. We know that we can't settle as a nation to be in the bottom quarter of the pack internationally, which is where we are today, in terms of access to high-quality early learning and high-quality early education for our children. We have to expect better. We have to demand better. And while Congress considers the full scope of the President's policy priorities in this space, what has been most inspirational and what will ultimately help us achieve this as a country is the momentum underway in our local communities in places like Seattle and King County. You know, the work and the decision that was made here to authorize $58 million to develop this pilot program to really move forward preschool as an opportunity for every Seattle child and every Seattle resident and family is truly inspirational. And it's not just happening here in Seattle, it's happening around the country. And in places like New York, in places like Cleveland, in Denver, in Boston, in many other communities, we're seeing great strides around expanding early learning. It also should be noted that this is not a trend that is happening on the Democratic side of the aisle or the Republican side of the aisle. This is leadership from our corporate community, from our local elected officials, at our county level, at our city level, from our philanthropic community and philanthropic partners, from community leaders, from faith leaders, from families that are rising up and expecting and demanding more in these earliest years for our children, for their individual future and for our collective well-being as a democracy moving forward. And so it is this momentum that will ultimately, I believe, push us forward and ensure that we are delivering high-quality early childhood education to every child in America. Now, I'm also proud that Seattle and King County recently led the largest delegation to a convening that the President hosted last month at the White House. Yourselves a round of applause to highlight the importance of early childhood education and early learning to our communities and to our future. The White House Summit on Early Education brought together a set of leaders from around the country and from communities around the country to have a collective conversation about how to prioritize this work as one of the most important pillars of our domestic priorities as a country moving forward. And we were inspired by the science that was brought forward within the day. We were inspired by over $330 million worth of corporate and philanthropic commitments to expand high-quality early education around the country. We were pleased to contribute to that with the announcement of new preschool development grants that will get the President's vision for universal preschool going in communities across the country, as well as the announcement of our Early Head Start child care grants that will collectively, with the preschool grants, reach 68,000 additional children before their kindergarten year with high-quality early education. We were inspired by the leadership that we were seeing coming from across the country collectively, from Republicans and from Democrats, really moving and joining together, motivated by the science and by the research that shows what an important investment early childhood education is. So moving forward, the collection and collaboration of federal, local, state officials, and the work that is done and being forged in communities like Seattle and King County will be the engine that drives this movement forward. So I thank you all for the leadership that you have given collectively to this important work, for the steps that you've already taken here to move this forward. And as the mayor alluded to, the country is watching. And we have high hopes for Seattle, for King County, for your children, and we're hoping that that will help pave the way for the rest of the country to move forward and to provide every early learning opportunity that our children need to be successful. Thank you all so much.
Roberto Rodriguez, thank you so much for those remarks and for giving us a glimpse of what's happening around the country and what the Obama administration is up to. Our final presenter, and then we'll have the Q&A, is Mark Shriver. He is the president of the Save the Children Action Network. Shriver created Save the Children's early childhood education program and reinvigorated its literacy, nutrition, and fitness work in the U.S. through partnerships with more than 160 schools in some of the most impoverished regions of the country, benefiting more than 70,000 children in 14 states. Also, he was chair of, I should also mention that he was a member of the Maryland House of Delegates from 1994 to 2002. He was the first chair of the Joint Committee on Children, Youth, and Families, and was appointed chair of the Children and Youth Subcommittee of Maryland's House Ways and Means Committee. In 1988, he founded the Innovative Choice Program, which serves delinquent and at-risk youth through intensive community-based counseling. Shriver subsequently created the Choice Jobs Program, a private nonprofit that trains, places, and supports former Choice clients in jobs, as well as the Choice Middle Schools Program, which was a model for keeping at-risk middle school children in school. He's done a lot more, but I just tried to sum up a few of the things that he's done. Let's welcome to the stage Mark Shriver.
Good morning. Good morning. All right, well, you guys were a lot more energetic when Roberto said good morning, so I was very impressed, because usually in Washington you say good morning, everybody goes hello, you know, they're dead. Thank you, Angela. You read my entire resume. There's nothing else to say, so that was very nice. Thank you. I'm so honored and excited to be in Washington State and Seattle. I've been out here a number of times since Save the Children started working here in 2008. We were originally funded by Thrive by 5, which I know is now Thrive by 5 Washington. I've been up to Lake Quinault School in Grays Harbor County. We also work in Pacific County, and it's such an honor to be back here in Seattle. I was so happy when I got the email from Jackie and Mike Bezos saying, you know, would you come out to Seattle in the new year? It's going to be a collection of all the leadership in Seattle and in King County. And I know that the Mayor Murray talked about, you know, coming from a big Irish Catholic family. I don't know, the Mayor left and came back, so I come from one too. And when I got that email from Jackie and Mike, I immediately called up, you know, my family members to rub it in, right? Because the Bezos invited me to Seattle, so it was a big honor. So I called up my sister Maria. I said, Maria, you can't believe it. I've been asked by Jackie and Mike Bezos to go to the King County Early Learning Symposium and Roundtable. The mayor is going to be there, the county executive. There are going to be mayors and leadership all across Washington State. She goes, are you kidding me? Jackie and Mike asked me to give that talk. And I said, what are you talking about? You don't know anything about early learning. She goes, are you kidding me? I'm on NBC News. I've written 5 bestsellers. I know all about the issue. I'm a big shot. You're not. So I hung up on Maria. I called my brother Timmy. I said, Timmy, you know, I got asked by the Bezoses to go out there at the beginning of 2015. But Maria said she was invited first. I think she's lying. What do you think? And Timmy, you know, runs Special Olympics, goes, I don't know, but I got a message to call Jackie and Mike myself. So I don't know if I was the 3rd Shriver or the 4th or the 5th, but I'm happy to be here. I appreciate it. In my book, I'm number 1, so that's good. Roberto and I came in last night on the airplane, and he worked, as you all heard from my uncle, Senator Kennedy Teddy. And in our family, of course, when you work for Teddy and then you go work for the president, it's a demotion. So I'm sure the mayor understands what it's like to come from a highly dysfunctional Irish Catholic family. I want to just say what an honor it is to be up here. I speak after Mayor Murray and the County Executive Constantine, who I thought were terrific. I got to meet City Council President Burgess in Washington in December. I thought he was fantastic. I've heard Dr. Kuhl talk a couple of times. She's terrific, right? She had all that energy. All those statistics, and unlike most doctors or professors, she can make it understandable. I've seen her talk in Washington State before. I've seen her talk in Washington, D.C., and she's terrific. It gives me a little bit of guilt that I didn't do as much as I did with our kids, but it's good stuff. Angela, thank you for that nice introduction, as I said. First Lady Trudy Inslee is here, I think over there somewhere. Yes. I just want to say it's great to see you again. I know that the governor has put forth the biggest increase in early learning history in the history of Washington State, and that's a big deal. And when I met the now governor and First Lady, I don't know, 2.5, 3 years ago when I was in Washington State, before they got elected, I know the governor's putting forth the budget, but I also know the First Lady's driving it. So thank you very much, Mrs. Inslee, for your leadership on that. It's really terrific, and I mean that sincerely, so thank you very much. I Was with our kids, yesterday at breakfast, and I said to our youngest, I'll see you on Friday, because I'm traveling this week. And she goes, where are you going? And I said, well, I'm going to Washington State. And she goes, isn't that the place you went this summer? And I said, yeah. And she goes, is it always beautiful in Washington State? And when we flew in last night and could barely see the ground with all the fog, it is always beautiful in Washington. And then Tommy, our son, our 15-year-old son, came in and goes, you're going to Seattle? And I said, yeah. And he goes, why don't you not talk about early ed and talk about Russell Wilson and why he should, why don't you trade him for RG3? And I'm like, Tommy, I can't get into that, honey. And he got up and walked out. So I want to just say it really is an honor to be back in Seattle, to be in Washington State. I've spoken in front of the Microsoft Alumni Network. I've been up to the Gates Foundation and know of the terrific work they're doing in maternal newborn child survival, as well as early ed, not only in Washington State, but growing it across the country. The Balmer's work, Susie McGill and her dad, Jim Senegal, and the wonderful work they're doing in Rwanda and in Seattle, too. And of course, Jackie and Mike Bezos. There's so much energy in this region. It's unbelievable. I saved their holiday card. I don't know if all of you got this, but if you didn't, you're gonna get it next year because you're on the mailing list now. But it says, our vision is nothing less than a cultural shift to become a true early learning nation, one brain-building moment at a time. I love that. Cultural shift that's gonna change the way America is into an early learning nation. And I wanna say the Bezoses have been at the forefront of this effort. They have been kicking butt and taking names. They have been leading the charge. And I think the audacious vision of creating a cultural shift to create an early learning nation is terrific. I carry this around in my briefcase. I love it. And to Jackie and Mike Bezos, thank you so much for everything you've done. So you all are probably wondering what Save the Children Action Network is. We created it, Save the Children created it about a year ago, literally. It's been in existence for about 12 months. I'd spent the last almost 30 years of my life going around the country working on early ed issues, little juvenile delinquency issues. And in the last 12 years at Save the Children, I've gone and met with a lot of governors, state legislators, appropriations chairs, and they all tell me that early learning is really important. It's really one of the most important things. They care about children. But when push comes to shove, when the budgets come out, the money's not there. It's not there at the level that it needs to be. And frankly, I said to the Save the Children leadership, 18 months ago, that I was tired of being patted on the head. It's this kind of bobblehead reaction that politicians, a lot of them go, yeah, it's great, it's really important, and then they don't do anything. And that's because kids don't have a voice at the table. They don't have political muscle behind them. And that's what Save the Children Action Network is really about. It's trying to build on the remarkable efforts of so many groups across the country, and including here in Seattle and in King County, towards creating a national goal of early childhood education from birth through 5 years of age. I did a little talk with Willie Geist, the guy who's on the Today Show, and he said, what are you gonna do? What is SCAN supposed to be? And I said, well, ultimately, SCAN, our aspiration is to become the National Rifle Association for kids, the NRA for kids. And he said that is the worst analogy ever. And I said, I gotta be honest with you, Willie, people aren't gonna forget it. That's what we wanna do. We wanna have the same juice for kids that the NRA or the AARP has for seniors, the NRA has on the gun issue. There are a couple of other groups out there, but there isn't that voice for children at all levels, on the federal level, the state level, the county level, the school board level. What Roberto talked about so beautifully and what President Obama is pushing with bipartisan support, some bipartisan support, needs troops on the ground to implement that. And that is what SCAN is. It's a 501c4 that is trying to mobilize people, trying to pursue good policy, and to complement that with press. We call it the 3 Ps, okay? So Roberto talked about the policy on the federal level. We participated in the 1B campaign. We were the largest supporter of in-kind support to the 1B effort here in Washington State. And we want to take that effort to the state legislature right now. Senator Litzow and Representative Ross Hunter and Representative Kagi have introduced bills in the past. They haven't passed. If one is introduced this year, which I understand it will happen, we want to be with foot soldiers in the state capitol pushing that issue forward. We participated in the electoral activities this fall in Seattle, but we want to take the people that we've met and worked with and help pass it on a statewide basis. That's the policy front. On the politics front, it's really people power. We don't want to just spend money on an electoral campaign. We want to have the foot soldiers on the ground that will be in the state capitals, in City Hall, trying to continue to push those issues so that if politicians get elected, saying that 0 to 5 education is really important, that they're then held accountable for that when the legislature comes in session. A lot of groups that spend money in elections and then hope that politicians do the right thing when they get elected. We want to make sure that the people that are in Seattle or King County or in South Carolina or Iowa or wherever we're working are actually then following up, that are actually holding the politicians accountable. Because we want to be able to say to politicians, look them in the eyes and say, early education is the most important issue for our future. We know the brain science, we know the economic arguments, we know there's bipartisan support. People will tell you the polling comes in at 70%. Why the hell aren't the politicians following what the people are saying? Because we don't have the political juice, we don't have the dough to actually influence those elections and to hold people accountable. That's what SCAN is. Save the Children Action Network wants to do that. And then the final component of it, the third P, so you have policy, you have politics, which is really people power. The third P is press. We did polling to find out what messages resonate in Seattle, which is different than the messages that resonate in South Carolina. It's different than what resonates in Iowa. So each of those areas, certain words resonate on the issue of early childhood education. We want to get that message out. We want people to write letters to the editor, to the local newspapers, to blog it, to put it out in social media in order to create an echo chamber, really a groundswell of support that'll make a difference and encourage politicians to actually stand up and do it. So this year, our first year in existence, was really a year of testing it out. We participated in 8 races across the country, including obviously here in Seattle. We won 6 of them. That really wasn't the question. What we wanted to find out is, were there messages that resonated with people that could actually get them to show up and vote, to change their vote. In one race in Iowa that didn't break the way we wanted it to, we actually learned through a control group, because you can actually control group for voters now and then send information to certain voters and see whether you move them. One of the races we lost, we saw that the numbers went up high enough that if we had mailed information to both groups, that particular candidate would have, I think, lost. So even though it was a loss, it was a W, because we understood and learned from it and got success from that. We figured out what messages worked, what group of voters really care about the issues and might change their votes for it, and what areas of the country we might be able to play going forward. So let me just end my comments here by saying, again, the same thing that I said to our board of directors when they considered whether to create a 501c4, because Save the Children has for over 80 years delivered services not only in America but all around the world. And I think they understood, that the board understood, that to really affect systemic change, we needed to participate in the electoral process. And I said, as I said before, that what we really need to do is to mobilize people on the ground, to use the press, and to use people that are on the ground, real human beings, not guys dressed in suits coming from Washington, D.C., but maybe the guy that owns a Jiffy Lube in Seattle, or a woman who is a doctor, or a guy who works at the PTA. We want real people that understand the importance of this, that are part of the 70+% of people that really believe in this, to get involved and to hold our political leaders accountable. We want to become the NRA, the AARP for kids. It's a huge task. It's an audacious goal. Chances are we're going to get our heads knocked in. We may not succeed. But if you really believe that kids are our most important resource, and you really believe that they are our future, then we got to put our money where our mouth is. We got to get up out of here, and we got to mobilize not only in Seattle and in King County, but all across the state of Washington, because as Roberto so beautifully put it, this is an area that the whole country is watching. And if you can do it in Seattle, and you can do it in King County, and you can do it in Washington State, other states will follow. So when I start off by saying it's exciting to be here, it really is, because this is a beacon of hope. This area is a beacon of hope for not only the West Coast, but the entire country. Thanks very much.
Mark, thank you so much for that. I love how your words just create a picture in our minds. Like the idea of being patted on the head anytime by politics. I love that. That was a perfect way to describe it. I'm inviting her. Actually, we don't even have to invite them. They know what they're doing. Dr. Kuhl is back, as well as Roberto Rodriguez. And we're going to want to stay on time, so we're going to try to keep it to 4 questions or so. Gentlemen, I love it. Our first question is for all of you. And here it is. Can you bridge the importance of parentees and language development to the quality of early care outside the home and professional development?
Well, I'll begin here and say that we have to recognize that a key component of quality when it comes to early learning opportunities for our children, regardless of where they spend time, right? We have upwards of 70% of our children spending some amount of time outside of the home, whether that be in a child care center or in a formal preschool setting or an informal custodial arrangement. But regardless of that, one of the most important pieces is parent and parent engagement and the relationship that our youngest children develop with their parents and with the other adults around them. So I think as a country, certainly in the scope of our federal policies, we have focused on parent engagement and on the relationship that our parents develop with their children as a key component of a child's well-being and a child's development. And we need to make sure that if our children are spending time in formal programs, those programs have an active component that reaches out to parents. This is why we've focused very heavily, at least one of the components of the continuum of policies we've put forth has been around home visiting, because we know in some of our more successful early Head Start programs, the family service component and the home visiting component ends up being a really important linchpin to the development and well-being of kids.
Okay, I would say the operative word, as Roberto said, is engagement. So it's parents are the first teachers of the child, and so that engagement that the parent shows with the child while talking, while interacting, while playing, while hugging, while singing, all of that is part of the same piece that's engaging the brain. But the reason we have to get this information into the groundwater is that it's all of us. Wherever the child is, whether it's in school, whether it's in a daycare, whether it's in a play group at another kid's house, we've all got to understand that we're the ones bringing them along. That, again, the brain has to be built. And so we all need to take that responsibility. We're the agents of change. So it's the parents first and foremost, but it's all of us. So that's why it's important that this gets into the groundwater.
Mark?
They said it.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'll let you answer this next question first. Given that so many children across the county live in poverty, what role do other supportive services play in early learning? For example, services to prevent or respond to domestic violence, homelessness, and hunger. Mark?
Well, I think, did I hit the button? Thank you. I guess I talked too much the first time, right, Roberto? Here, you can have the broken one. I mean, I think, you know, what we've heard consistently here this morning is a partnership. You know, Pat just mentioned the fact that we all have to get this in the groundwater, I think was the expression you used, across the board. I think it requires, I saw a guy over here talking about it takes a village, and I think it really does take the business sector, the nonprofit arena, the elected officials, and advocates all involved in trying to make a difference. Not only in the actual child itself and the brain development, social, emotional, cognitive development of that kid, but also to address the issues that the family's facing at the same time. It needs to be comprehensively done. It's hard as hell to do it. You know, been in trying to do that for 30 years. It's difficult. But I also think, you know, going back to what SCAN is about, is we've got to move beyond preaching to the choir. I mean, I bet you a lot of folks in here all know each other. The question is how do we bring people that aren't here into the arena? How do we get them engaged? How do we get, you know, business leaders that aren't the normal person, you know, Shriver advocating, or, you know, Roberto coming in from the White House. This is new stuff. The brain science is new. It's exciting. That's a different person in the arena, right? You get a big businessman or a big businesswoman, political leadership start to say, why is that person here? Why is the head of a bank in here talking about early learning? And that is, I think we'll start moving the ball forward.
Dr. Kuhl, did you want to respond to that question?
No, I think that's great. I love it.
Okay, well, this one is for you. Should early learn, actually for you and the others who want to weigh in, should early learning policies and practices focus more on low-income communities and communities of color, as these communities face the most significant disparities?
I think the messages have to be very inclusive. You're absolutely right that children who are being raised in families in which the opportunities to learn are reduced, that information that the brain is needing to be built is not there. And so you can see it in everything that you try to measure. In families who are lower on the socioeconomic status scale, and that's usually a standard measure taken on the basis of the education of mother and father and the occupation of mother and father. And income sometimes is measured, but it doesn't have to be. It can be a correlate, but it's not really about money. It's about your understanding that children need, in that early period, information from you, engagement and involvement on your part. So what we see in families of low socioeconomic status is there's fewer books in the home, there are fewer opportunities to learn from language around the table, there are just fewer of the experiences that kids that are growing up in families in which there's tons of talk and there's tons of interaction and there's opportunities to learn all over the place. It makes a difference to the brain very, very early in development. Our research is focused on 5-year-olds, and there's other research now on 18-monthers. We think we'd see it at 8 months. It makes a difference. The brain's being built. If the information is not there, then the brain doesn't construct itself in the same way. These networks in the brain depend on experience. And so the baby statistically learning in social context is mapping that information and building circuitry to take the next step. So all of these things, literacy, it starts in the crib. So the reason we need to be inclusive is that all parents, the richest of parents who sometimes put DVDs in their kids' rooms as a substitute for the time they don't want to spend, that's not doing the right thing either. So at all levels, we have to understand how the baby brain really works. So.
You know, I think Dr. Kuhl's absolutely right. And we have here, obviously, an imperative. Part of the imperative that I think we need to bring to this work is that a child's zip code and a family's zip code should not predetermine the educational opportunity. Right, the educational opportunity that he or she has moving forward, so that there is a real focus that we have to bring to our neediest families in this work, because they do have less access to print and written materials. They do have less access to formal early childhood education. We've looked at these trends. We know there's been mapping across our communities that have shown that our children that are living in poverty and in low-income households need the greatest help, they need the greatest opportunities. So that's an important pillar of this. We also, though, know that there is great benefit to providing high-quality early childhood education to every child. And part of our objective here is to build an early learning nation that provides that opportunity, not just for some, but for all. And you know, we look at some of the studies that we've seen just around pre-K, for instance. There's a recent meta-analysis by Hiro Yokoshima and Deb Phillips that shows that took a look at all of the pre-K research and found that even for middle-class families, there was added benefit to high-quality preschool. So we're encouraged by, and the arc of the President's plan is to provide the catalyst to begin serving our lowest income children, because we know that actually those families benefit the greatest from these investments. But also to provide the support for states and communities to reach up in whatever manner they develop, whether that's through a sliding scale or whether they're able to develop a full continuum and full access to preschool through their existing programs for middle-class families. We also know that that integration of our families from diverse economic backgrounds is great for kids. It's great for families. We should be aspiring to that integration early.
I actually wanted to say that because I know, Mark, you talked about us preaching to the choir many times and how do we get the message out. You know, we emphasize the importance of every child having access to preschool. And you guys experience, and this is actually my comment or question, wouldn't you do you find that once parents know better, we do better? In terms of when a parent, if I had access to what some of the research that Dr. Kuhl presented today, you know, I might have done more of that. I just wonder if part of this is really being able to educate parents, being able to reach them early so that they can implement that research with their children.
I mean, I think that, yes. I mean, I think, you know, I said it in kind of a joking manner, but every time I hear Pat talk, I learn something. Our youngest is only 9, or is 9, so, but I think you learn every time. Sitting in front of the TVs, I didn't really honestly know that was as powerful, or not as powerful as I thought. You know, so that was a learning experience for me. I tweeted it out of here. I think the question is how do we get that message out? Vroom is an attempt to saturate a community and do that, to turn us, as Roberto said, into an early learning nation. But it does cost money, and I'm going to stay on message, going to pivot back and say that the public sector needs to be engaged in a higher way financially than they did. Undoubtedly, it's going to take time. Roberto talked about, a tiered approach on that. Pat talked about making sure that, people that are not living in poverty, my families and similar families like ours, understand some of the brain development because it helps us too. So it's all families have got to learn this. But there does need to be an investment by the public sector, whether it is a city or a county or a local, and definitely the federal level. But we got to get somehow off this thing where we walk into politicians and tell them that it's a 70% approval rating issue and the thing doesn't change. It's so frustrating. God, I really am sick of being patted on the head. And I've said it before, I think this is the biggest civil rights issue, social justice issue of our time. There are so many, Roberto has that line about the zip code. President Obama used it in, I think, his inauguration speech, right? Yeah. That's outrageous. And we just all clap, and then the same crap continues to go on in this country because we put up with it somehow because we're not fired up. And my mother started Special Olympics. There is a lot of power in, one focused, I don't want to say pissed off, but, focused woman who wants, in that case, to have more resources for her sister who had developmental disability, right? And she didn't have the same opportunities that her brothers did, and her brothers become president and attorney general and senators and all that, but the sister couldn't play sports. So my mother said, we're changing that. And there are, Eunice Shrivers in this room here. If you get fired up, Jackie and Mike are doing that. Jackie's, hammering the hell out of people on this and trying to create an early learning nation, but she needs foot soldiers, right? I mean, right? Yeah.
That's right.
And I think that, we got to reach out beyond our little group of friends and bring in new people, because this is an issue where kids are coming out of zip codes, and they're never going to compete, honestly, rarely ever, right, Roberto, with our kids. You have a 9 and a 6-year-old. They have so many advantages to a kid coming out of Southeast DC. They're just not, much less a kid in China. And you all know that China is putting in this huge investment, right, Roberto? You know what I want to do? I want to have a symposium in DC where we bring leadership from China and talk about the investments in early learning in China to embarrass Americans, which we should do.
There's no question. You know, we are, as I mentioned, at the bottom quarter of the pack internationally, which is shameful as a country. You know, and when the president goes and speaks to the leader of South Korea and they say, well, we just made a commitment to provide high-quality universal preschool for every one of our children. This is something that the time has come to do this as a country. And there is the power of the individuals as well as the power of our communities that ultimately will make this happen. While I'm on stage with Mark, I have to use one of the quotes from his brother, from Bobby Kennedy, who talks about the tiny ripple of hope and the potential that one person has to send forth a tiny ripple of hope that will ultimately change the course and the direction of where we're going. And you know, Mrs. Shriver was an amazing ripple of hope for, and what she did with Special Olympics was an amazing ripple of hope. This can happen, and there are ripples of hope throughout this room and throughout this country. And I think it's just a matter of creating the momentum across the country, which is our people, to say that the time has come and the time is now to make this a priority for every one of our kids, and we can make this happen.
And Roberto and Mark, you actually answered my final question, so I'll let Dr. Kuhl weigh in. It was, what's the most important thing schools and cities can do to support early learning? I know, Mark, you just talked about the elected officials really investing the money, also getting fired up, us getting fired up about this. And Dr. Kuhl, is there any final thought you'd like to leave with people on what we can do, what action steps we can take?
Well, I think it's been said, but seizing the moment. I mean, we in this room are on the same page, and that happens rarely, but we in this room are on the same page. A lot of people in this county, in this city, in this state are on the same page, and even in the nation at the White House conference, I was there, it was fabulous. So what we have to do is seize the moment, develop this as the passionate piece that you're going to make a difference in the world on. All of us on this stage have made that commitment. Many people in this room have made that commitment. You have a chance to make a difference at very few things in the little time that you're here on Earth. So set this as one of your priorities, seize the moment, and do something about it. I think collectively we can make it happen.
All right. Thank you so much to our panel. Roberto Rodriguez, Dr. Patricia Kuhl, and Mark Shriver. Thank you so much.
Great job, yes.
I saw you take a breath. Was there something else you wanted to say? Okay, all right.
That's my uncle. I know, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that.
Thank you. And coming to the stage now, some folks who are really in the trenches working and advocating for early learning. While they get situated, I'll let you know who they are. Sheila Capestany, Enrica Hampton, and let me just tell you where they're from. Sheila is Executive Director of Open Arms Perinatal Services. Enrica Hampton is the Early Care and Education Consultant at Kindering. Ginger Kwan is the Executive Director of Open Doors for Multicultural Families. Hilda Magana is the Director of El Centro de la Raza's Jose Marti Child Care Center. Sonia Griffin, Manager of Quality Assurance and Training, Seattle Department of Early Learning, and Dr. Kip Herron, Superintendent of the Auburn School District. Let's welcome them to the stage. We'll hear first from Sheila Capestany, again, the Executive Director of Open Arms Perinatal Services.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? There we go. Good morning. I am really excited to be here as this important work for our babies, our children, and our families. It's all very exciting. So we've heard about the brain research and what we know about babies and how remarkable babies' brains are really starting in the womb. Anyone who knows someone who is pregnant or has been pregnant yourself, you know that babies respond to the sound of your voice. They can respond to voices around them. The minute they're born, they can turn towards the voices that they recognize. So that brain development starts very early. The other important body of research, though, that's relevant to early learning has to do with parents. And the research shows that parents are most open to change and new information in that very early part of their parenting, when they're pregnant and in those first few years after their babies are born. And in addition, research also shows that social isolation, the stresses of poverty, including housing instability, food insecurity, family insecurity, unemployment or underemployment, all impact the ability of a family to be healthy and well. And it impacts their ability to get that good start in life. So here's one of the most important facts that we have talked about early learning a little bit, which is that babies and young children are going to grow best and learn best in the context that parents that are well supported and nurtured themselves and have the information they need in a way that they can use it. And this is where Open Arms comes in. So Open Arms provides support service to low-income families and pregnant women through doula care. We start in pregnancy, we attend labor and birth with women, and then we stay for up to 2 years after their babies are born. And we provide, for them at that point, we provide support, we provide information. We take the information of what we know about good brain development and we make it understandable to people in ways that they can use it. Our services are community-based, and what this really means is that we try to match culture and language as much as we possibly can, and that most of our providers are of and from the communities that they serve. So we work intensely with families, and mostly low-income families, to provide the kind of support that they need in order to help themselves and their babies get off to the absolute best start. So to illustrate our work, I actually want to tell you a story about a client of ours. And I have changed her name, although I'll use a name that so that we can, you know that I'm not doing anything with confidentiality here. So a young woman came to us, Anna. She was 18, and Anna was 5 months pregnant when she was referred to us. Anna was in unstable housing and had very challenging family relationships. She was scared about being pregnant, and she talked about that with her doula. But she also expressed a desire to be a good mom and to provide well for her child. She really wanted life to be different for her baby than it was for her. Anna's doula worked with her throughout her pregnancy, and they formed a strong, trusting relationship. She shared information with her about her baby's development and what to expect after the baby was born. Anna and her doula talked about brain research, but they never called it brain research. They talked about how the baby was developing in the last trimester, that she was already responding to Anna's voice and to her own touch. And they taught her what we call playing tag with the baby when the baby's in the womb. You can push the baby on one side and the baby kicks on the other, and you can grab a foot. So really teaching her interaction before the baby even arrived. The months after the baby came were rough for Anna, but she was, with the support of her doula, she felt empowered to make some really important decisions and difficult decisions. And one of them was to find housing in a different part of the county than she was living in, away from a difficult family environment. In the final weeks of her time with her doula, they talked about her hopes and dreams for herself and for her baby. And she wanted her child to have that better life, and she wanted to go back to school. So her doula was able to refer her to the local community college that has a parenting support and parent education program to the school. Services ended with this young woman, but recently she contacted Open Arms with a picture of her little one, who is 3 now. He is thriving in his preschool, and she's working on finishing her degree from the community college. Anna told us that she remembers well those last months of pregnancy, and she remembers well his birth and how much her doula had helped her believe in herself and what she wanted out of life. And she was just letting us know that she was actually doing it. So this is the right support at the right time. This is what Open Arms does, and we believe that it makes a huge difference for babies and for families.
Dr. Hampton.
Great. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. Well, I'd like to introduce you to Isaac. When Isaac was 24 months old, he was saying just 2 words. He rarely responded to his name or verbal directions. He did not interact with other children. He made very little eye contact, and dumping materials onto the floor was his primary method of exploring toys. And Isaac also loved to run, and he was fast. And if you weren't careful, he would run right out of any room. Now, I had an opportunity to meet Isaac at his childcare program. His childcare provider had actually approached his family because she had some concerns about his development, and she also had a desire to get some strategies to support him in the classroom, and quite frankly, she really wanted to literally keep him in the room itself. The family, with some hesitation, agreed to have me take a look. And when I reflect on that, that took real courage. Our mascot at Kindering happens to be a lion named Courage, and it took real courage, in my opinion, for Isaac's family to agree to have someone that they don't know come and take a look at their child. Because no family ever wants to hear that there's something wrong with their child. And Isaac's family was very hopeful that all the questions being raised about his behavior and his development were unfounded, because after all, he was just 24 months old. I will say that there were many tears shed during the next conversation with Isaac's family, because among other things, I was recommending that the family come to Kindering for a comprehensive developmental evaluation, and this was not at all what Isaac's family was expecting to hear. They did agree that some classroom strategies would be helpful, but they were not ready to do anything further. They did speak with their pediatrician, and they allowed me to speak to the pediatrician as well. And I feel that that took a lot of courage. Now, the pediatrician initially did not agree that any type of evaluation was necessary. However, the pediatrician was very open to listening, and by the end of our conversation, she was convinced. And when Isaac was still 24 months old, his family moved forward with the developmental evaluation. Now that took real courage. Now I will say that Isaac did qualify for early intervention services in a team consisting of a special educator, a speech and language pathologist, and an occupational therapist, provided services both at his childcare and at his home until he turned 3. And while Isaac continued to qualify for special services after he turned 3 and transitioned into the school district, I will say that Isaac made some tremendous gains. Just want to share a few highlights for you. Isaac was handing toys to his friends, and he was also taking a few from his friends as well. When Isaac was told walking feet, he slowed down. He was no longer leaving the classroom, which was of tremendous relief to the teacher. And most important to his parents, Isaac was calling his parents by name, Mommy and Daddy. So Kindering reaches out to infants and toddlers in a variety of settings, and this is just one story. It's a success story. But imagine for a minute how easily Isaac could have been missed. You know, the child care provider, she recognized the differences in Isaac's development. She shared her concerns with the family. She knew who to contact, and she reached out for assistance. And I think as an early care and education consultant, that one to me is significant, because so many times I see when I go out to a child care, I've found out that that child has been asked to leave several different settings, and these are children before the age of 5. So the fact that this did not happen was really courageous on behalf of that child care provider. There was also specialized support that was able to be provided on site. The pediatrician, although not initially concerned, took extra time to listen to the concerns that were being raised and helped with the referral process. And then that family, when they were ready, took that difficult next step. So early identification of young children is so important. We know the brain research. Now a few additional statistics. I'd be remiss if I didn't share a few numbers. There were 3,419 children who received early intervention services in King County between July 2013 and June 2014. At Kindering, we found that 46% of children who received early intervention services no longer qualified for special education services at age 3. And one local school district has calculated that for each child who does not qualify, they save an average of $51,399 over the education career of that child. Early identification and early intervention organizations such as Kindering are an essential part of the early learning continuum. Isaac's family had the courage to take those first steps. Let us continue working together to build a strong early learning community in King County that supports the individual and diverse needs of children and families. Thank you.
That was Enrica Hampton from Kindering. And now we're going to hear from Ginger Kwan, Executive Director of Open Doors for Multicultural Families.
Can you hear me? You can tell because I didn't learn how to speak English until I was about 17 years old. And that's right, okay? If I start to say something kind of babbling, sounds like Chinese, that's the reason, after you listen to the presentation today. As a parent, I have 3 children. Soon after my youngest one was born, and we start to notice there's something different on my son. His behavior was changing. He was a very lovely boy, was playing, laughing, playing with you all the time, was talking, and everything is right on development. But then he started to exhibit any behavior that we never expected that would happen. He stopped talking. He started to cry all day long. He would hide himself under a table. He would be crying, stepping on his feet, and wouldn't say a word and expect me to know what to do. At that time, I was a parent of 3 younger children. The youngest one was only 2 months old. My oldest one was 4.5 years old. So 3 children at home, being a single mother, being a mother living in an apartment. My husband has to work. We have no transportation because he has to drive to work. We didn't know what to do. All I knew was something wrong with my son. We went to the pediatrician, talked to the pediatrician about my concern. The doctor says, well, boys are late talkers. Don't worry about it, because he's jealous about a young baby, so don't worry about it. 2 months passed, went back to talk to the doctor again. Things got worse, never changed. Same answer, and I say, but he is not talking. But he is not doing this. He was happy, he was very, very excited. What happened? And there's no answer. And during that time, people told me, because you had just had a baby, so that's why, the baby doing something. Maybe you should spend a family vacation together. So my husband and I, we took our 3 young children, carrying the youngest one on my back. We went to a camp. And when we were at campsite, the camp manager was chatting with us, and she said that, so what brought you over here? And I started to describe to her about what my son was doing, and so that's why we need a family vacation. And then she said, sounds like your son is autistic. And I was thinking, artistic? What the heck is she talking about? How did she know that my son is artistic? Look at him, he's only 12 months old, over 1-year-old boy. I don't even know how he can draw. What do you mean? Because there's no word autism, there's no words autistic in my English dictionary. I never knew that word was there. 2 weeks later, after we got home, I was reading a magazine, the Reader's Digest, and then I saw an article. I read about Sylvester Long's, his son has autism. And then suddenly I realized that is what she was talking about. Then soon we have a speech evaluation. Then speech pathologist told us, you have to go take your son to see a neurologist. After 2 months, another waiting list, we got to see the neurologist within that 4 hours of evaluation done by an intern doctor, came out to tell us that here's a diagnosis, your son has autism, take him to early intervention program. After that, the journey is long. It was painful. There's a lot of tears shed. There's a lot of research. Every single night, my husband and I, we discuss what we should do, what we can do. So many things happened. And then soon, our home becomes a therapy center. We have trampoline made. We have a lycra swing made. We have a lot of things made. And those things turns into my life mission. And I wish I would become another Mrs. Shriver, even though I'm not there yet, but I'm trying to be there. So 15 years later, I become the executive director for Open Doors for Multicultural Families. I formed this organization based on the value that I know what it takes to support a family like me from a low-income status as an immigrant who does not know much English at that time. How can I get a better support to support families like me and others? So last year, Open Doors, after 5 years operation, we have served more than 700 families. And our services are based on cultural and linguistic appropriate services. Our bilingual staff are able to serve families speaking more than 20 different languages. And we believe that by include families in the communities, by the system advocated for equal access and social for justice, and at the same time, we create the inclusive communities, everybody wins. Today, my son Mikko, he's 19 years old. He is a happy boy. He goes to work, he gets paid. He goes to swimming, he goes to Special Olympics. He had a great life. I think his life is much better than mine. And that's a result of what it takes as a whole community to support a child, to support a family. A child with disabilities is a child first. Parents who need support in order for them to do the job. And I'm urging everybody here to think about those who don't have particular families in King County, the South King County families, and I ask for your support. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that. And now the director of El Centro de la Raza's Jose Marti Child Care Center, Hilda Mangaña.
Buenos días.
Buenos días.
Para los niños trabajamos porque ellos son los que saben amar, porque ellos son la esperanza del mundo. It is for the children that we work because it is they that they know how to love, for they are the hope of the world. Jose Marti. I would like to speak with you on how we take the steps to become a high bilingual bicultural program at El Centro de la Raza. El Centro de la Raza, Jose Marti Child Development Center, is a bilingual bicultural program, Spanish and English immersion model. And we use English, the English speakers are learning their second language, and monolingual Spanish speakers they are learning to learn English. We also take a very great pride in supporting the diverse cultural backgrounds at El Centro and the children in our program to build their self-esteem about where they come from. This confidence and the self-esteem supports their growth in all areas of development, the social development, the cognitive development, the social development, and the physical development. We have developed in our curriculum since El Centro de la Raza was founded in 1972. Throughout the history, we have developed a philosophy and strong values based on a cultural awareness, diversity, and social justice. Over the year, we have also implemented a research-based curriculum and pursued high-quality programming. We are the first bilingual center of the West Coast to receive the NAUIC accreditation, and now we are part of the Washington State Quality Rating System, Early Achievers. Both local and national partners are very important in helping us to maintain high quality and successful program. By providing additional services and helping us to provide a rich and supportive learning environment for the students. For example, we have the Seattle Public Library, the Raising the Reader project. At national level, we do at national level, we have support and advocacy for all our communities. Maintaining this high quality, it is very important for the success of our children. So we comply with all the criteria of all the licensing, all the accreditation, the funding sources, and we do what also we uphold the underlying philosophies and the needs of our community, including culture and language. We incorporate cultural events and social justice issues into our daily curriculum, and this helps us build the children's sensitivity and respect for diversity and other cultures. The research-based curriculum blended with social justice issues and the needs of our community are a very important quality for our program, and we think that it is a contributing factor for the high rates of the outcome. Historically, Latino and low-income students have begun school significantly behind their white peers. But over 90% of our students finished our program fully prepared for kindergarten. We are proud to see the work of our students as they progress to school and grow into adults. And many of our students, graduates, have come back to support their community, work at El Centro de la Raza, and work for the communities. Thank you so much.
And now Sonia Griffin, she's Manager of Quality Assurance and Training at the Seattle Department of Early Learning.
Thank you. So good morning or good afternoon. I'm so happy to be here and to share my story and to also reiterate the points made by Mayor Murray. When he talks about 2014 was a good year, I agree. 2014 was a great year, and I'm so excited to be a part of this team. But we do still have great challenges ahead of us. And the data that has been shared and talking about children and families in the margins, when I think about the faces of those children and families, I think about the families that live in my own community. And so this work for me is not only my work that I do on a daily basis, but it's also personal. So we at the city are deeply committed to moving towards higher quality early learning programs for all children in the city of Seattle and throughout King County. And we've done this by increasing access to quality early learning opportunities, by taking previously limited funds and levy funds and general funds and blending those together with Head Start and ECAP and Step Ahead to create a longer day for children. We've done this through family engagement and support in culturally diverse contexts through development of dual language preschools. And it was so great and inspiring to hear Dr. Kuhl just talk about and just affirm that when we started on this road about creating these dual language preschools, we were on the right track, and that preserving children's home language was very important and critical to their long-term school success. We currently have four dual language preschools, and which Jose Marti is one of, and we will be opening a 5th dual language preschool later this year that will be Vietnamese English. We are also working very hard to ensure that we have culturally relevant programs for our diverse immigrant and refugee population. So we've worked very hard this past year. We have a team of education specialists who've been out there working to recruit 60 new family child care providers to serve the immigrant and refugee community. So this is huge and just amazing work being done in the city of Seattle. We've also worked hard to make sure that our standards are aligned and our teaching practices and all of our assessments with the Department of Early Learning and Seattle Public Schools. It's so important that we're all on the same page and that we're headed in the same direction. When we started this work back in 2000, 2002, there were probably like 5 or 6 different assessments being done, and everybody was doing a different curriculum, and nobody could agree on what exactly did a child need to know to start kindergarten. we have come so far, and I'm really, really inspired by where we are in the leadership of the Department of Early Learning and giving us early achievers, so we have a great framework that we can all work in and get behind. In the city, we've also just been very fortunate to have flexible funding through the Families in Education Levy and our continued general fund investments, and that's going to help us to continue to extend professional development and assessments to even more early learning programs in Seattle. And through the joint leadership and shared commitment to collaboration, I want to talk about and share my story of the Seattle Early Education Collaborative. This is a community-based, this was a group that came together with community-based organizations and have partnered to really bolster the local early learning system. When we started this work, we talked about there's so many pieces of this, of the early learning community. It wasn't really a real system, lots of different siloed pieces together. And how do you talk about assessments when there's no real, no system or protocol for these assessments? So this group came together and developed these relationships with each other and with the school district and began to really create a culture of data-driven decision-making. And this was a huge paradigm shift for our providers to say that we are now gonna look at our data and our results, and that's how we're going to make our investments. And it means that if something is not working for children, then that means we go back to the drawing board and we're gonna have to change it, and we're gonna try something else. We don't keep doing the same thing over and over again and get bad results. So we've worked very, very hard to look at our data, to analyze our data, and to make changes when children are not, when we're not getting the outcomes that we expect to see or that children deserve to have when they enter kindergarten. And this means that it's important that our teachers are trained in what do assessments mean? How do I do assessments? So we've spent a lot of investment in training our teachers and supporting our teachers and our directors to make sure that they had the skills so that they could actually do a really good job with these assessments. I see these stickers everywhere talking about it takes a village. Yes, it does. It takes a village. And I hope that when we leave here today, we'll go out and be a part of that village and keep doing the work. But I want to say that SEEK's vision is being realized today in so many ways. This idea of the community working together to achieve greater gains for our children is very exciting. We are really, I would say, interested in ensuring as we move forward that all of our work is rooted in the social and cultural context of the children and families we serve. We know that you cannot educate a child outside of their cultural context. To do so would be to be damaging and harmful to that child and to that family. The other thing that SEEK is very focused on is ensuring that we have, again, I talked about the structure. You need structure, you need these systems in place around assessments, professional development, kindergarten transition. And as we move forward in implementation of the Seattle Preschool Program, these are the elements that will help us sort of leverage and launch. We have a great jumping off point to begin the work with the Seattle Preschool Program. And SEEK's goals were very simple. And ones that I think we all here agree on. We want to increase the number of children who enter school ready, and we want to increase the number of teachers who demonstrate effective teacher practice. When we started SEEK, we all understood the crisis we were in. We had read the statistics, the test scores, and the graduation rates. And it took a little, I guess, a come to Jesus meeting with my partner, who's no longer here, but we knew we had the same goal in mind, but our path of how we thought we would get there, I think it looked a little differently. So after our, what we call our knockdown, drag out fight, we began to work together, and we brought the community along with us. And this is kind of how SEEK evolved. And it was a 3-year journey. So we had a group of individuals, probably 20 to 30 people, who spent 3 years of their life. And one of those years, it was commitment on a Saturday, coming out every single Saturday, consistently to do this work and to build this dream of SEEK and bringing us all together. They did not get paid to be there on the Saturday. They were just there because of their passion and their commitment to this work. We knew we did not have all the answers, But together and collectively, we knew we could figure out most of them, and I think we did. And what we learned along the way, that things that work, there are some things that work, and there are some things that don't work. But in spite of these challenges, we tried to keep our children at the center of our work, and we were optimistic that things would change. Not because we wished they would change, but because of the commitment and hard work undertaken every day by people who care for, educate, support, lead, love, and nurture our children and their families, people like you in this room. One of our challenges was how to support teachers in preparing children, mostly from low-income families, within their current realities, without limiting their ability to succeed in the larger community. So our response was, we have to teach both. We will need to assess both. To be successful, our children would need to learn to code switch, and I think Dr. Kuhl talked about this switching thing as well. So it's just exciting to know that, yes, children are learning to code switch, and that they know how to use the right behavior in the right language in the given context. And I think the science agrees with us that this is good for our children's brain development. And so we were so on the right track. And when you have people who are not scientists and we're trying out all these different strategies, to have it affirmed and to know that you're doing the right thing it just feels really good today. Overall, I would like to say that SEEK has helped us reach more low-income children. We started out serving about 350 children through the levy, and we expanded that now to over 2,500 3- and 4-year-olds who are being supported and assessed and receiving curriculum and training and all those things. We've improved quality in several of our preschool programs. They were part of the first cohort for the Early Achievers pilot, and all of them met the quality standard for early achievers, and they are, I would say they paved the way for the folks coming behind them. We've improved the use and fidelity of the measures and the data that was being collected. And and our results are amazing. I just looked at the data and double-checked it before I came, but last year at the end of the school year, 1,500 3- and 4-year-olds were assessed on teaching strategies goal, and over 85% of them met the age level expectations in all 6 domains. SEEK has trained hundreds of teachers and helped many complete a BA and MA degrees. And again, one of the greatest things that SEEK has done is pave the way for the Seattle Preschool Program and the work that we are about to embark upon. And if you're in this room and you're a part of SEEK, I want to say thank you for a job well done. And I hope you will continue to work with the City of Seattle as we move forward on our journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. And Dr. Kip Heron from the Auburn School District.
So I very much appreciate the cue that you're going to give me in terms of my time, because I have the gift and the burden of verbosity as a superintendent. And any superintendents would know that in the audience. So I appreciate that. The second thing that I always like to mention is that I did have an early learning experience this holiday. I had 8 grandchildren with me under my care alone for 2.5 hours, all under the age of 8 years of age. So I really felt like I was telling stories about Into the Woods. I'm here because Auburn's had some success in 3rd grade literacy. We all know about the projections in terms of what that means in the research related to being successful in school and how important it is that students have comprehension skills. And anybody that sees the non-fictional text and the 52 different genres that get introduced to them, mine was Chaucer. You know, it was a different language for me. It was a second language. But if you don't have good reading comprehension skills in the 3rd grade, then you're going to struggle with the introduction. So during a budget crisis, we decided as a district with a school board and a new superintendent, all hands on deck for 3rd grade literacy. And I will tell you that our research began with Hattie, and I'll say that it very much mirrors what was shared with you today from Dr. Kuhl. It is the statistical, there are high yield strategies. Some strategies yield 1.5 years of learning, others yield 2 years of learning, and others get 1 year. Well, the Auburn School District was experiencing 1,000% over a decade, 1,000% increase in English language learners, okay, 100% increase in poverty, and over the last 3 years, another 30% on top of both of those items. So I call it chopportunity. The challenge and the opportunity is growing. It's the mother lode of making a difference in the world. The world is right in Auburn. It's our chance to have a world-class system. And I'm probably here because we, through our partnerships with our community-based organizations, all of our child care, 90 of them, mom and pops to those that were nonprofits and so forth, we entered into a partnership. We need your help. We reached out to them, and then we provided them training, professional development, and we gave them materials if they completed the training. And then as they grew, we kept increasing the kind of demand that they needed in their programs. And that resulted in us hitting 84% of our kids literate in the 3rd grade. Now, compare that compares to all the rich districts in the state of Washington. It compares. So we kind of like, our kids can read as well as those people in the northeast side of Washington. That is a really good thing, right? The only difference is my kids speak 2 languages. All right, so it's ability. It's building on their talent and their ability. And then along comes CCER, a network to help South King County superintendents and districts to figure out how to work together. Because you know what? These kids move around. They come from Tukwila, they're there for a while, and then they're down in Auburn. They move around. So a collective regional approach to this. I honor what you're doing. It's going to make a difference. We're doing deep dive now because we got a federal Race to the Top grant. Thank you, Mary Jean Ryan, for helping provide that leadership and support with CCER and all the superintendents and all the people that have worked with that Race to the Top grant, because now we're doing a deep dive and we're using all kinds of CBOs who are delivering their services in a different way, and I'll close with that. They're delivering it in a different way because now they're customizing, just like we do with the instruction. They're customizing for the family what that family needs to provide the emotional, the social products. For example, we have the parent-child home project going on at Dick Scobie. We have the neighborhood house. We have King County Housing. We have AYR, Auburn Youth Resources, counseling centers, Auburn Youth Counseling. We're providing all those resources. I'm going to leave somebody out. CIS, YMCA, we're all working together, and guess what? We got our Dibble results back here recently. We're starting with 2-year-olds, and it's big numbers. It's big numbers. We had 1st graders who only 11 students in the entire Auburn School District, over 1,000 students, by working in this fashion, who were at risk for reading at the end of the year. It works. It works. This works. It can happen. We have 2 90% poverty, ELL at 60% schools that are the highest performers in math in the state of Washington. Number 1 and number 2, I'm talking about all the elementary schools. All the elementary schools. Bill Gates neighborhood, Auburn 98002. It can happen. It will happen.
That's awesome. Dr. Heron, thank you so much. Many thanks to the panel for sharing those inspiring stories. It just gives you so much hope. And you can see why King County is a model for the rest of the country on what can be done with certain types of intervention. And we know there's more work happening throughout this area, throughout the state, and we hope that you'll continue it on. Our panel can leave the stage now, and then we have some closing remarks. For the sake of time, I'll just ask that the following speakers come up in the order in which I introduced them now. Well, first of all, we're going to end this how we began with King County Executive Dal Constantine, and then Seattle Mayor Ed Murray. And then Matt Griffin is here as a business person who is vitally interested in early learning and making sure our children are prepared for life in the 21st century. And then finally, representing the philanthropic community in Seattle, Jackie Bezos will come up and show a video. But let's start with King County Executive Dal Constantine.
Thanks again, Angie. I know you're all hungry, but, you know, it's for the kids, right? That was the lightning round, and wasn't that energizing to know all that work's going on in our community? More like the rolling thunder round, but it's, you know, important work happening in King County, and, you know, stuff that I learn as I travel around this county, learn the work that our school districts are doing, the nonprofits are doing. It's so energizing to be at the head of the government of a place like this where the people support doing the right thing for our kids. One of those people I saw in the audience is our King County prosecutor. I just want to mention that he's here, the creator of the 180 program to help youth offenders turn their lives around. Dan Satterberg, thank you for joining us today. You know, science, as you saw, research being conducted today at our own University of Washington, go Dogs, shows that actions we take as a community in support of children and families and moms can make all the difference in their ability to thrive. We've heard today from people who are doing exactly the right thing and who are taking us in the right direction. We need to build on our work with public health clinics and early intervention programs, early care and early education settings, school and community-based programs. However, many of these programs are jeopardized by reductions in federal and state funding. And yet, this is a critical moment in our state capitol. One of our leaders in the legislature, Representative Ruth Kagi, is here with us today. And she reminds me that this is the moment when we have bipartisan support in the state legislature, a Republican sponsor in the Senate, a Democratic sponsor, Representative Kagi, in the House, for Early Start, a bipartisan effort to create the funding and the framework for quality early learning. If we don't do it this session, we're passing up the federal funds that will help us lead this effort forward. So please let your legislators know that we support bipartisanism in Olympia, and we support the passage of Early Start this session. Now, you know, while our region enjoys a well-deserved reputation for a high quality of life, it's a fact that we also suffer the very disparities that plague the rest of the country in social and health inequities that are growing nationwide. If we do nothing, these inequities will eat us alive. They will drag us down. They will drag down the well-being and prosperity of our entire region. As I've said, I made a commitment to support our prosperity by seeking to ensure that every child in our community, whether born into wealth or poverty, regardless of race or nation of origin, or yes, as we've heard, zip code, has the opportunity to flourish. To that end, I've put forward a proposal for a regional prevention-oriented investment framework. We call it Best Starts for Kids. You see, most of King County's general fund is spent dealing with bad outcomes: crime and punishment, mental illness, addiction, costly adult interventions long after health and behavior have become hardened. Jail is the costliest and least effective intervention of all. Over time, we must rebalance our portfolio toward far less expensive prevention work, to prevent problems that result from neglect or worse, to prevent big adult problems that could have been corrected when they emerged in childhood at critical points in a youth's development, to create best starts for kids. Best Starts for Kids will focus on 3 areas. First, pregnancy and early childhood years. The latest advances in the science of brain development prove that what we all intuitively know, that the crucial years of pregnancy through early childhood are where investment yields the greatest results, and we have seen ample evidence of that here today. Second, recognizing that brains continue to develop through youth and lifelong habits are formed in that time, we should focus during the critical school age years to quickly intervene at the first sign of physical or mental or behavioral challenges. And third, for children to be healthy and succeed, the communities in which they are being raised need to be healthy as well. These three areas of healthy child investment, prenatal and early childhood, school age, and what we call communities of opportunity, won't come free. But they come cheap. They are a bargain compared to the enormous price we are paying today. You see, the moral argument for investing in our children is easy. The emotional appeal is undeniable, but the fiscal case is just as compelling. As you can tell, I'm excited about this opportunity. Best Starts is a very specific approach, an approach to turning the tide of growing disparity, of mass incarceration, of the ever-escalating bill for failure. It is a strategy to improve outcomes for kids and families, and by extension, for all of us. I have strong partners in this effort, the County Council, and Councilmember Dembowski, who's taken the lead at the Council in creating a countywide youth action plan. And I look forward to working with everyone here, with the County Council, with elected officials in our cities and our school districts, to move forward this year with Best Starts for kids. We have handouts in the foyer, or if you're technologically inclined, you can go to kingcounty.gov/beststarts to learn more. Best Starts for Kids complements and supports the important work being done in the city of Seattle, leading the way on universal pre-K. So let me turn this back once again to Mayor Ed Murray.
Once again, thank you, Dal, and once again, the city looks forward to partnering with the county and other jurisdictions to build this future. I want to emphasize a point that Dal Constantine just made. First of all, I want to acknowledge somebody. I've often called Tim Burgess the godfather of pre-K in Seattle, but the godmother of pre-K in the state of Washington is Representative Ruth Kagi. So if you didn't write it down, I want to repeat what Dal said. Early start, please contact your legislator. Please have your organization contact your legislators. As Dal said, if the legislature does not act this year, that federal money will go away. So please do that. I just want to emphasize that point. You know, part of leadership, part of what we all in this room as leaders need to do is set a direction and plan for the future. Part of that is short-term, but part of it is long-term, a future that we may not actually, maybe not live to see the results for, but probably not be working and see the results for. That's what Seattle did when we passed pre-K. We will see some of those results in a few years, but those little 3- and 4-year-olds who will walk into classrooms in September, the real result will come about 12, 14, 15 years from now. As we see them graduate from high school, as we see them enter college, as we see very different results in the lives they live. That is an incredible commitment you have all made, and I want to thank you again for that. But we have a lot of work to do. We've got to get it right in Seattle so we can grow it and make it truly universal and sooner than later. And we've got to get it right by building partnerships with the rest of you in the county, in our neighboring cities, and with the state. And I look forward in doing that. I look forward for doing it for a very personal reason. The most difficult thing I've experienced as being mayor has been the number of young African-American men who die as a result of gun violence in this city. It is epidemic in this city as it is in cities across the country. One thing we can do to change this, not the only thing, but one thing we can do to change this is to give them a different start, so that whoever is mayor and stands here some years from now doesn't have to visit the mothers that I have visited. That is why this work is so incredibly important. Just a year ago on Monday, I gave my inaugural address, and I ended it with words from President Kennedy's inaugural address. Let us begin. We have begun, so let us continue. Let's change lives. Thank you very much. And man, I screwed up. An incredible man who stood up and shared our effort in Seattle, Matt Griffin.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I get started, though, I have to thank Dr. Kuhl for some of her comments tonight. As some of you know, I'm a business guy, and I build buildings in downtown and real estate development. What I didn't realize until today that I probably am here because my parents brought me home from the hospital when the house was still under construction. So there were skill saws and hammers going all the time. Probably all those circuits were put together right then, and I never had a chance to do anything else. I could have been a politician or a lawyer or a doctor, but I was stuck with all those circuits already formed. It's actually quite true. But I often say I'm lucky. I'm an adopted kid, and I happen to be adopted by some parents who cared a lot about education. And I really believe that as we look at sort of the gaps in our community or in our country, that education is the long-term, basically, solution to those questions. And we know from our studies, you know, and as business people, and we think about how to allocate resources for where we get the biggest bang for the buck, we clearly see that the younger we spend the dollars on the younger children, the better chance we have for getting bang for the buck. I've been fortunate to work on the Parent-Child Home Program with United Way or with the Seattle Quality Preschool with the mayor and Tim Burgess, and I applaud those organizations for what they're doing here. We need to basically understand how those good investments are really the things that change our community. And similarly, I will applaud, you know, the Dow Constantine and his team for their work on the equity report and social justice. You think about laying those two over each other, about first about where do we get the biggest bang for our buck in this education, and then the equity question about where in our county can we get the biggest bang for the buck. So we're fortunate. And I think it's also, as Dr. Kuhl said earlier, if we don't seize the opportunity, shame on us. I mean, when we had this preschool vote where we had almost 70% of Seattle say they were willing to tax themselves to do something for younger children, it gives a sense of what the feeling is here in our community. And we need to basically move forward with that. And the last piece I'd say is just as a purely business person, that when I talk to my business friends, they often say, well, who wouldn't basically argue in favor of this? And I think the point that often gets missed is we all have to make some sort of sacrifice to do it. I mean, some sort of resources need to be allocated to this issue as opposed to something else. And so as you talk to your council people and your legislators and your business friends and all your other colleagues, I remind them that this really takes making a choice. But it's a choice to build a better community so that we can, by allocating our resources. And, you know, I think about it in kind of three different ways. One is that we know that we need the trained workforce to build the kind of community we want. Second of all, we know that it's all the jobs that we're going to have in the future are going to take more education than we've had in the past. And third, it's just about fairness. I mean, it's unfair that we have people in our community that don't have the great schools that some of the others have. And we need to start that with this early childhood education and put the base in place so these children can do well. So I encourage you all to help where you can help and put your shoulder to the wheel. So I'm happy to comment as a business person, and I'll turn it over to Jackie.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm definitely inspired. There's definitely a movement afoot in Seattle, in King County, in Washington State, and beyond. And a movement's a great thing, but it won't result in a culture shift unless everybody's a player. So if we want to have a new language and a new vision and a new concept of what the incredible years are, those first 5 years of life. It's going to take all of us to play in this game. So at the foundation that I work for, what we started asking ourselves is, what would that look like? How can we get there? What would that path be? And we realized very quickly that we had to tax everybody with the goal of looking at themselves and finding out what asset it is that they can bring to the table. And this really grew very large to include everybody from the bus driver to the mayor to the scientists to Bob Watt, everybody, right? So what is your unique asset that you can bring to the table to make sure that no child gets left behind? And so for a shopkeeper, it was his storefront window. And for the bus driver, it's the 3 steps that you take to get up into the bus. For foundations, it is putting their money and their brain power into how they can solve inequities. So I would like to show you a brief video. It's about 5 minutes long. We developed something in the foundation to give a common language around the first 5 years of life, presenting the science directly to the parents, putting it in their hands in the moments when they are most predisposed to act upon that science. And we were privileged to pilot this program in Southwest King County with the Roadmap Project and Southwest Youth and Family Services. So we're very pleased to be in out of our 4-month pilot and getting ready to go more broadly within King County. So I'd like to share that with you, and then after that, you're free to go and change the world. Thank you. If you're in a place where you can't see, I'm asking you to move over.
A few miles southwest of Seattle, something remarkable happened on March 29, 2014. After 2 years of planning, a new early learning initiative called Vroom launched in this community. Nonprofits and hundreds of grandparents, parents, and children joined in the celebration. Why?
Science is showing us that baby brains grow and change based on everyday experiences. So when you talk to your baby, when you read to your baby, when you hug your baby or smile at your baby, these turn into brain-building moments. And all babies' brains depend on these everyday interactions to grow and change. So Vroom is creating tips for parents that remind them to use these everyday activities to build their babies' brains.
The launch of Vroom marked the first time families would get a peek at Vroom's brain-building concept.
How many cups are those? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
An exciting beginning for a new initiative that will change everything. Sharing the science behind the first 5 years of life and how simple interactions build the architecture of the brain is what Vroom is all about.
Gonna open it?
Cooing and babbling turn into words and sentences, and words and sentences turn into interest in letters and sounds that will lead children to prepare themselves to read. So when parents are building brains in the beginning, they're setting themselves and their children up for all the stages that development of the brain will require.
For brain-building opportunities to be adopted by the community, Vroom would have to come alive for the entire community. What would that look like? Vroom built a strong on-the-ground partnership with community-based organizations to work closely with families.
I have a 2-year-old deaf.
Vroom's advisors were on hand to explain the science behind Vroom and how to use the tools. Vroom became a community focus as the momentum continued, catching the attention of newspapers and radio.
Mi nombre es Sandra Maqueda con El Rey 1360 y hoy estamos hablando sobre Vroom.
Even local teenagers got involved, painting brain-building moments on bus shelters and a shopkeeper's wall.
Vroom!
By week 3 of the pilot program, Vroom's team installed brain-building moments on tables at the local mall's food court and posters in storefront windows. Vroom also became embedded in the community by taking part in local events, appearing at farmers markets and festivals. A local band, Recess Monkey, even created a Vroom song. Vroom ambassadors were on hand at local events to help parents download Vroom's free app, which families can personalize as a way to receive daily brain-building tips.
Now that I have the app and I have those opportunities, I think Vroom has really changed me being a better parent, being a better father.
I definitely see myself using Vroom. I think it has really practical tips that I can apply every day.
By August 2014, Vroom had taken root southwest of Seattle. Thousands of tip cards had been handed out, and 3,500 people had downloaded the app. It was just the beginning of what someday will become a national effort to turn everyday moments into brain-building moments.
I use Vroom every day. It's in our daily life now.
Can you find the yellow sock? Is it that one?
I was concerned that I didn't have enough time to spend with my son. I didn't know how helpful these activities actually were to him. Now that I know about Vroom, I realize that a lot of these activities are building his brain. Vroom has really been life-changing for me and my family. Are you ready for another daily Vroom? Yeah.
Imagine Vroom in your community. Imagine Vroom everywhere. It can happen. It's happening now. Visit joinvroom.org and check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
So you go pink spoon, orange cup, pink spoon, white cup.
Don't forget to download the free daily Vroom app and join thousands of parents who are already turning everyday moments.
Do you know what color this is?
Green.
Into brain-building moments.
Is that a circle?
Yes.
Yes, it is. What's this? Is this a square?
Yes.
What do we got here? Oh, this one has this. Is this one soft too?
Yes.
What about this side? Is this side softer?
Yeah, both of them.